Hi everyone, I'm Ben, and in this video we're covering Law 2 of the 48 Laws of Power. This one is never put too much trust in friends, learn how to use enemies. So the second law is really about understanding relationships and bringing a level of objectivity to them. It generally focuses on having friends and whether or not they betray you, but this can be done in two ways. It's both active and passive. Now, most of the examples and videos and in the book as well do focus on this active betrayal. You tell your friend your secrets, the move that you're going to do, and they either take the glory for themselves or they betray you. And, like in the example in the book, they knife you in the back. But there's also another dimension that's not really considered here, and that is what I'm kind of calling passive betrayal. And that is where you have this expectation of the relationship that your friend, let's call him Bob never lets you down. You can give anything to Bob in a work context and he'll come through for you at the end. Now, that's not because Bob is objectively the person that always comes through, but because you're really close with Bob. And how could Bob possibly betray you when he knows that something's really important for you? And what the betrayal really here is that you do not have an objective view of your relationship with Bob and the type of person that Bob actually is. That is where you are let down or you've put too much trust in that friend. You haven't really understood your relationship with them or the person that they are, or in another way, that your relationship with them has actually murkied the water on the type of person that they are and what they can be trusted to do. The second part of this law deals with enemies, and it's that you need to learn how to use those relationships. They aren't just things to be passively accepted or to generate frustration, but there are ways to use those relationships with enemies or the enemies themselves to your advantage. So the second law is important because you need to understand that relationships can be used by you or used against you. Now, this typically does deal with, again, focusing in on friends, that if you put too much trust in people, they can use that trust against you. Now, that can either be by, you tell them something really important in business and a great idea that you've had, and they go away and tell the boss or present to someone really important your idea and claim all the glory for themselves. It can also be where you're trusting a friend to come through for you. They understand that it's a really important piece of work, really important milestone that you need to deliver, and they don't come through. They prioritize something else and they let you down. Now, the part that's a little bit, not conflicting, but a little bit kind of murkier here is that we're generally told to trust our instincts and our feelings and our guts on this stuff. And that can be usually to trust your friends. I think the nuance here is to bring a level of objectivity to those relationships and the people that you are having the relationship with. When you put too much trust in people, you also make yourself vulnerable to manipulation. Now, how this usually comes about is when you put your blinkers on, that you are actually just so focused that this person is your friend, they will never betray you, they have always come through with you. The more that you are not focusing on the objectivity of the truth, of understanding that everything is always moving all the time, that people can sometimes be your friend and other times they're not, that also that friends are human. There's going to be times when people, they have the expectation of one thing in their friendship and you don't do that, and they want to pay you back. They feel that like you've let them down and they want to even the score. This is not them turning into an enemy, but it's also understanding that they are human, that they're not these angels that are only ever going to do good by you. What it's really saying is that you need to focus and understand and be objective. Understand what people are doing for you, where your blind spots are, where your weaknesses are, and make sure that you're not just taking people for granted or they're taking you for granted, because when you take your eye off the ball, that's when you get caught out. Now, the other piece around this on why it's important is around the identification of enemies. We've spoken about friends, but the piece about enemies is you need to understand who your enemies are. This has a couple of different layers to it. One is you need to be aware of people that have bad intentions for you. They're not barracking for you to win. They want to see you fail. You need to understand who these people are, just in the ordinary course of work, because you need to understand objectively whether they're going to be helping you or hindering you. So in how to apply the second law, it really comes down to 4 overarching principles. The first one is keep your friends close, but your enemies even closer. Now, this is a popular saying. Everyone's kind of heard this one, and it's always felt a little bit funny. Why would you try and keep your enemies close? There's some funny lines where people say that people that say that have never really truly had enemies. But what it's really trying to say is that you want to be careful who you trust, but also differentiate that between who you trust and who you need to keep your eye on. So when we're saying keep your enemies close, what we're really saying is you need to understand and keep a close eye on what they're doing. You need to be aware of when they're making moves against you, when they're trying to sabotage you. You need to know what they are doing. Now, the other part of this, the first part around keeping your friends close, what that's trying to really call out is that you want to keep your friends close because they're your allies, they're your friends, but you don't want to bring them all the way in, because when you trust them with everything, you make yourself vulnerable. When they know all your plans, all your key moves, all your weaknesses, you are now vulnerable to that person. You have brought them inside of the circle, but they now know how to hurt you the worst out of all the people. Related to this is the second principle, and that's don't share your plans too early. Now, what this again is about is when you share your plans with people, you are letting them know what you're about to do. That can be sensitive. It can be you about to make a big move at work. It can be about you maybe breaking up with someone. There's lots of areas that you apply these laws in your normal everyday life. But in the work context, what this can mean is that you are making yourself, again, vulnerable to someone having information about what your next steps are. When you give them this type of information, you're enabling them to sabotage you. They can do something with that information. They can take your idea and use it for themselves. They can tell your enemy. They can do this accidentally as well. There's not always intention around sabotage, although it often is. But the more people you bring into the circle, they say loose lips sink ships, and that the only way two people can keep a secret is if the other person's dead. Now, that's a very morose take on it, but what it's trying to say is the more people that know the information outside of yourself, the more areas in which you're vulnerable, the more weaknesses in your attack or your strategy there actually are. When you tell people information, they know that information about you, and they can tell people, and they can tell people, and all of a sudden your secret move that was going to come, that important piece of work or that great idea that you want to present on Monday, it becomes common knowledge. Or someone else kind of takes that idea and uses it, and they get all the glory and you don't. The next principle is use enemies to your advantage. Now, this is another one that I feel is probably misunderstood. People often focus on this one around how you manipulate people to do your bidding, how you can get enemies to help you without realizing it. But I think it is more around motivation. Knowing that someone is out there working against you can make you work even harder. This can be in the gym, it can be training for a sport or a martial art, or things like boxing or Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Knowing when you're doing something hard and you want to take it easy, you don't want to have to go into the gym, you don't want to have to go for a long run, you don't want a hard sparring session. Knowing that someone out there that you view as an enemy is out there working hard gives you that extra oomph. It makes you get out of bed and brings that extra motivation for you to try harder. This can be applied in a team or a work context too. Knowing that, if you work at a bank, that there's a rival bank and they're always kind of beating you at something, or they're snapping at your heels, you're number one and they're number two. That is motivation that you can use for yourself and for your team. Identifying that person as your enemy, or that team or that entity as your enemy, and that they are coming after you. They're coming to take what is yours. That is a great source of motivation for you and the team. Now, the other way that you can use enemies as well is by turning them into friends. Abraham Lincoln has a saying, and I think it's something like, the way I neutralize my enemies is I turn them into my friend. And that is a really good approach to take with these things if it's possible to do. An enemy is a threat. They are a hostile entity towards you. They are going to be trying to block you, to trying to hurt you, to try to stymie your growth. If you are able to work on that relationship that you've identified, to do things, to not necessarily trust them, but start to turn them and get rid of that hostility, eventually they could become a friend. But more importantly, you want to stop them from being an enemy. They can become a neutral party. They can become someone that can help you or not help you, but they're not actively working against you. For me, that's a really big win. And a way that you can use them is you identify them as someone that you need to turn, someone that is hostile towards you, that you need to bring the temperature of the room down with. The final principle with this one is to build strong alliances. Now, this may seem a little bit counterintuitive to the overarching law here, but what you need to do is you need to understand that you do need to identify and build relationships with people that share the same values and goals as you. People that you can trust to a certain degree to help you along your journey, to help you advance together as a unit. Now, As we said at the beginning, what you need to do here though is make sure you bring a level of objectivity. You don't want to blindly trust people. You don't want to bring them in and put the blinkers on yourself. You want to build a network of people that you can trust to do certain things, that share certain values. And that's a really good way to approach it too. When you understand someone's values and you share them, you at least are working towards a common goal, whether doing it in partnership or individually, but you know you're moving in the same direction. So that's usually a good identifier for someone that you should be in an alliance with. The other part of this is how it plays into enemies. By building strong alliances, you are building protection. You are building allies that help you in those situations. Now, this can be in hostile meetings where you think someone may attack you. It helps by having other people that are going to speak up for your defense. That can also be, whether you wanted to outnumber them or if you're having an off day, but also in meetings where you may not be present, but you may be the topic of conversation. What's really important here is you want to build those allies, not just in your peer group, but also at the levels above and below you, because there is power and influence that happens at those different levels that you may not be part of. Obviously, above is really important, but you want to also have a grassroots presence as well. You want, for example, if you're a senior manager or a director, you want the analyst to be on your side. You don't want them to be your enemies that are using information against you or feeding it to your enemies that, for example, are prioritizing your work last. You want to build that alliance, build that network, and have both upward and downward alliances. So to wrap this on up, the second law is really around the power of relationships. And why it's important is that relationships can be used by you or they can be used against you. So what's really important here is bringing a level of objectivity to the relationships and the people that they are with. You need to understand people that are potentially allies and people that are potentially enemies. And what you do with this information is a little bit different for either group. But the important thing is that you identify them early. You want to understand what that relationship is and act accordingly. Now, the things that we covered around how you apply this law is around keeping your friends close, but your enemies even closer. Don't reveal your hand too soon. How to use your enemies to your advantage and building strong alliances. And that's a wrap, guys. If you like the video, please hit like and subscribe down below, and I'll see you next time.